Roll, medic.
At this time, 16, Medic 1 stays behind one of the vehicles on business 380.
He's down. Shots fired. He's down.
Any copy, shots fired, suspect down.
I'm asking all fellow Coloradans to please pay close attention to a great injustice that is occurring at our very own hands in the state of Colorado. Convicted in Colorado and being currently held in Arizona, a Saudi Arabian citizen named Homaidan Al Turki is being unjustly held by Colorado state authorities.
Thank you for tuning in for the second installment of my series. I'm putting a lot into this. I appreciate it, and here we go. In 1995, Homaidan Al Turki moved to the United States on an academic scholarship. He moved funded by his family, but on an academic scholarship to CU Boulder, where he ultimately ended up entering a PhD in linguistics. He excelled in school there. He excelled in school here. He excelled in his community. He was known for raising money for local Muslim organizations who didn't have, or Muslim people and Muslim organizations that didn't have enough, that took care of people, things of this nature. He was a fixture in the Muslim community, right?
It was a proud moment for Homaidan Al Turki in a year that has left him in serious legal trouble. Free on bond paid by the government of Saudi Arabia, Al Turki hosted Denver's Sunni Muslim community at a Ramadan dinner.
Just having the flavor to be between my brothers and sisters, the Muslim sisters and brothers here, is by itself, something that has a good impact on myself, especially after all of this trouble that I have gone through.
In particular, his lawyers say the government has been looking into the proceeds from Al Turki's Al-Bashir Islamic bookstore in Aurora.
This is very sad, but we Muslims basically, just after 9/11, we've been profiled.
So, on November 18th, 2004, everybody was shocked. Everybody in the community was shocked when his house was raided by the feds. So they end up raiding his house on a visa violation. As it turns out, Mr. Al Turki had brought an Indonesian woman with him from Saudi Arabia. And she was to be like a housemaid, like a servant, a live-in housemaid, things of this nature. So, well, apparently he had let the visa lapse. Her visa had expired. This was a violation. It was out of date. And so the feds showed up at his house. They arrested him, his wife, and the housekeeper. While in questioning, some weird allegations surfaced from Mr. Al Turki's Indonesian house servant.
Having already served his sentence for his alleged crime, Mr. Al Turki, father of 5, was supposed to be returned home to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the completion of his parole.
She starts claiming that, she's kept as a virtual slave, and that she's basically paid nothing, and that she is required to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and with no time off. She's doing, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children, all the normal stuff that would be required. But this is a lot of hours, right? And she says she's being paid like almost nothing, and that whenever she has time off, she is required to stay in the basement, right? She can't go anywhere. She can't do anything. Basically, she just confined to her basement, and not only to her basement, that she's living in a cold basement, an unheated basement, that with just basically a mattress on the floor and some bedding and things of this nature. Then the other stuff, the other accusations show sexual assault accusations, accusations of sexual intimidation, accusations that her passport was seized from her upon her arrival at the Al Turki's home, and that they told her she would be arrested if she left the house, right? So now we start talking about like slavery. We're basically starting to describe something like slavery. So Al Turki is questioned. Al Turki and his wife are questioned about the situation. And he denies everything. His wife denies everything, says, I have no idea what you're talking about. Some of the allegations against Mr. Al Turki, as far as sexual in nature were concerned, were very, very specific. They said that he came into the room and that he pleasured himself, if you will, while she was sleeping, pleasured himself on her. There was another time that he had, she claims that he had came into her room and fondled her. And then she also made the claim that he had, that they had actually engaged in intercourse, that he basically raped her. And that then the next like week or something, she came to him and she was worried and said, well, what am I going to do if I'm pregnant? What do we do now? Everybody's screwed if I'm pregnant, right? And he promised that he would never do it again, right? So these are the allegations of this woman. Mr. Al Turki and his wife are arrested and charged. On July 29th, 2005, Homaidan Al Turki was allowed to post a $400,000 bail. When everything was said and done, court costs, court fees, all this other stuff, whatever you could think of, his wife's bail, it came out to be about $1 million cash that Arapahoe County, Colorado, wanted to hang on to secure this man as not being a flight risk. So, with the help of the Saudi government and some friends, he borrows some money from some friends, and he's got some of his own money. He posts bail. He is able for him and his wife to post bail. Mr. Al Turki is ultimately charged with 7 charges. One of them has to do with the withholding of funds from this woman. And so apparently they had only been paying her, not much. I think they said $4 an hour or something like that. But they weren't letting her have very much of her money, right? In February of 2016, the trial of Homaidan Al Turki begins. He pleads not guilty. Him and his wife plead not guilty to all charges. The charges range from just theft, like grand theft, because he withheld this woman. The claim was that he allegedly had withheld this woman's wages, right, for all of these years, had basically had her work for him for like 4 years and barely paid her for anything, right? So there was the sexual assault. There was obviously sexual assault charges involved. There was basically theft of services. That's what it was. Homaidan Al Turki's defense claims that the feds filed a fraudulent case against Mr. Al Turki because they had failed to make a federal case against him for terrorism several years before. Mr. Al Turki had been investigated for providing material support for terrorists in the past. Remember the publishing house, Al Bashir Publishing, that Mr. Al Turki was running? Well, it turns out some of the books and CDs and sermons that he had translated were from a man named Anwar Al-Awlaki. Perhaps you remember him from the first video that I made. If you don't remember him, please go back and watch the first video. It really, by the end of the series, all 4 of them are going to tie in very well. They're all connected. So Mr. Al-Awlaki, if you hadn't watched the first one, is responsible for a lot of terrorism. He's an American citizen responsible for a lot of terrorism. So his sermons are responsible. They had tied Mr. Al Turki to Mr. Al-Awlaki because by publishing this man's sermons, the sermons that they believe directly are tied to the hijackers on 9/11, they know that Mr. Al-Awlaki came in contact with at least 3 of the hijackers from 9/11, and he proselytized hatred against America. So they blame this man for 9/11. Now, Mr. Al Turki, well, he helped Mr. Al-Awlaki spread his message, right? So now that the government has something on Mr. Al Turki, they're not going to let it go. That's the defense, right? The next part of the defense, Mr. Al Turki's second defense, is Islamophobia, the one that you would always argue. Islamophobia, you guys are racist, 9/11, post 9/11, look at all of the hate crimes against Muslims, the hatred against Muslims, the blackballing of Muslims, obviously, this is just an extension of this. They failed to make their case. At one point, Mr. Al Turki was pulled over randomly. I forget what state it was in, but he was pulled over, and they pulled him out of his car, ransacked through his car, and then took a bunch of pictures. This is like a local police department, took a bunch of pictures of the contents of his car, like files and things of this nature, and then sent them to the Denver FBI office and never said nothing about it. And then he finds out later, and whenever discovery happens, his lawyer finds discovery, that oh, well, it looks like they've been trying to make a case on this dude for a long time, right? So now they feel they got something. How valid it is, who knows? After 2.5 weeks of deliberation, Mr. Al Turki was found guilty.
In the end, it was just too much for his family and friends. Just moments before, they'd walked with a white-clad Homaidan Al Turki on what might be his final steps as a free man. Now he was convicted and immediately jailed, unable. Regardless of cultural differences, clearly his verdict was not lost in translation.
In the Arapahoe County, Colorado judicial system, jury of his peers, 12 people, his wife as well. He was sentenced to 28 years to life. This is something that happens in Colorado. They give open-ended sentences for sexual offenders. The reason why is so they can technically keep you locked up forever if you are not willing to program or do the sexual whatever rehab, I guess, whatever you would call it, the sexual programming that they offer in prison. So they give you an open-ended sentence depending on, let's say you get like a statutory rape charge that really wasn't that egregious. The woman was okay with it. It was consensual. She was just underage, a couple years difference, and you got hit, you're going to get something like a 2 or 3 years to life. And then if you go do the appropriate stuff, after a couple years, they let you out. The more egregious your crime, the higher the number becomes. So Mr. Al Turki got a 28 years to life in the state of Colorado. That's pretty egregious. That's saying that's not a statutory rape. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a claiming of a misunderstanding. So Mr. Al Turki's wife ultimately decides to plead guilty and take a deal. She doesn't testify against her husband, but she does plead guilty to lesser charges and agrees to deportation back to Saudi Arabia. When she gets to Saudi Arabia, she immediately becomes an outspoken advocate for the man's release. There are several videos you can find, different campaigns, videos online on YouTube dedicated to this man's release. The Saudi government is very interested in this man's release. he's an important dude, and they think a lot of him. No matter what we think of him, the Muslims think a lot of him. I'll tell you that. The Saudis think a lot of him because the Saudi government has actually several times has rallied for him to be released. And I believe the governor of Colorado even traveled to Saudi Arabia to speak with the Saudis in person to try to ease some of their fears about whether or not he got railroaded. And they actually thanked him for going over there and doing that. So the feds, so Al Turki goes to prison. The feds ultimately come to Al Turki and they say they will agree to a deal if for deportation for him to go back to Saudi Arabia, but he has to become an informant or something like that. I don't know how true that would be. That might be true. That might not be true. I don't know if it passes the smell test though, because I would agree if I was him, I wouldn't be an informant. I'd just go back to Saudi Arabia and tell them to screw off. They couldn't do anything. So I don't know if they would offer that deal. That seems like a weird deal they would offer. That doesn't make any sense to me that they would offer that. So Mr. Al Turki, he gets to prison. He becomes a model inmate almost immediately. He does all the right things. He goes to Lyman, Colorado. He's sent to a prison called Lyman, Colorado, in northeastern Colorado. And he becomes a parapro in the reentry program, what is called the reentry program in Lyman. And this program is to help people get on after they get out of prison, right? Get jobs, get resumes, make resumes, just do better, bone up on their skills before the people that are getting ready to get out. Because Lyman's kind of a hardcore prison. Mostly lifers, probably half the population has life, something like that, life or an extended sentence. It's a level 4. There's 5 tiers in Colorado, so 5 is the supermax. A lot of states 4 is the supermax, but 5 out here is the supermax, the shoe. 4 is just what they call closed. And so he was in a rough prison, but he generally minded his business. He was very active with the Muslim community inside of prison, in prayer and helping people out, right? So he's there for a couple years. Everybody's rallying for him to get out. They say, it's Muslim, Islamophobia, things of this nature. And he's not really getting any love. But one of the appellate courts revisits his case, decides that there was some sort of discrepancy in his sentencing, and they reduce it from 28 to life to 8 to life. Right? So now he's got some light at the end of the tunnel. There's something there. 8 to life, he's already got a couple in. He's got a bunch of good behavior because he never gets in trouble. He doesn't get write-ups or anything like that. One time he even bought, had I don't know how many, maybe 50 pizzas delivered to the prison. The dude had money. Dude came from money, right? So he has all these what you call delivered to the prison. And so finally, he gets, like I said, he gets it down to 8 years, but they're still pushing, for him to go back to Saudi Arabia and serve out the rest of his sentence in Saudi Arabia. This is the linchpin that they're looking for, you know what I mean, for him to be able to get back to his family. So everything's going good. Everything's looking good. He's got high hopes. Everything looks great, like it's going to happen. And they deny him. And the reason they deny him, my understanding is, it's the objection of the state in Colorado, in the state of Colorado, in Arapahoe County. The district attorney says, we don't see how sending him back to a country where what he did is not a crime is any sort of punishment. So we do not recommend that he is sent back. So the governor abided by this, right? 3 days later, the director of prisons the executive director of the Bureau of Prisons in Colorado is murdered in his home, in his front vestibule, right? 2 days after that, a man dies in a shootout with the police in Texas. The news runs with the story. White supremacists killed in Texas, most likely linked to the murder of Tom Clements in Colorado, the executive director of the Bureau of Prisons, right? Within a couple days, a news outlet comes out with a story that says Homaidan Al Turki is being suspected for this hit. That their idea is that he got turned down for parole, and 3 days later, he was so powerful that 3 days later he was able to have the Bureau of Prisons chief whacked by a white supremacist. They're claiming that this guy had so much pull on these white supremacists, right? What they call the 211 crew, a Colorado gang that they call the 211 crew, right? So now they decide Mr. Al Turki isn't going nowhere. They don't charge him with anything, and the investigation doesn't find anything to link him to it, but they decide Mr. Al Turki isn't going anywhere. They move him out of the state to another prison, and they say it's for his own protection because he had become too high profile now. He would be too high profile, and we need to protect him. And they have been moving him around to different states. I believe he's in Pennsylvania now. Don't hold me to that, but they keep moving. It's hard to get information because they don't announce it whenever they move it, right? Somebody has to write a story and say that they moved him. They're not really super open with the information as far as being in real time. This is actually a practice that they call putting them on skates. It's what they do in the prison system. If you want to cause problems, okay, we'll just put you on skates and just bounce you around from different prison to prison, keep cycling them through. And so they never really get comfortable. They never really get to be around people all that much. Keep them in the hole a lot, things like this. Sensitive need yard, shuffle them to a sensitive need yard, just bump them around, right? So this is what they've been doing to Mr. Al Turki. They say that they have nothing as far as I haven't seen any phone call or anything like that to where, because literally this dude got cracked. This dude got denied parole, and within 3 days, the director of prison got whacked, right? Like, this is the most efficient hit that's ever happened in the history of hits. Like, this is so there's no other way to get that message out of Lyman other than to make the phone call, right? So they should have the phone call. This should be an open and shut case. Somebody made a phone call to something. There's not that many people in Lyman. There's maybe 1,500 people in Lyman. I don't know how many people. Not everybody uses the phone every day. You know what I mean? So what? A couple hundred people use the phone every day. You got a couple hundred phone calls to look through. The director of Bureau of Prisons was killed, right? You could find that phone call. This should be an open and shut case. But they say that they don't have anything. So what do they have? They're denying this dude any chance at parole, and they keep shuffling him all over the United States. Why? Could it have something to do with the 9/11 stuff? Could it have something to do with Mr. Anwar al-Awlaki? Holding him responsible for that? I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Bye.